Okay, this is the second part of 1.2's lecture, and we're solving quadratic equations here. And I gave you two examples. This is exactly example 3, and this is example 4 in our series. And these are quadratic equations. And now I'm going to solve them by the quadratic formula, but they may actually factor. I believe this one does actually factor if you we didn't use that technique. So I wanted to give you one that actually does factor, but show you, but it does work with the quadratic formula as well. Now, the good thing, like I said a while ago in the previous part, is that the quadratic formula will always works. There's one big assumption there, though. The assumption is you write the formula down correctly. And if you miswrite the formula, then you're going to, of course, miss the problem. So this is where you got to pay, you got to be very, very careful. So a lot of people will forget to do the b squared. They'll just say b minus 4ac. And really, when I see that on homework or on an exam, I don't look at any of your work from then on out because I know it's going to be wrong. Anything that uses the incorrect formula, of course, is going to be incorrect. So none of the work will be right. So when you're going to use this formula, you got to make sure the formula has been written down correctly. So, but that's the formula. So in this case right here, A is 2, B is 5, and C is 3. So you just have to plug those numbers into the appropriate place and do the math. Opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So x is the opposite of b, so it's the opposite of 5, which is negative 5, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so that's 5 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is 3, all over 2 times the a, which is 2 times 2. So this becomes negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 5 squared is 25. Okay? 4 times 2 times 3, that's 8 times 3, which is 24. 2 times 2 is 4, of course. Now 25 minus 24 is 1. And the square root of 1 is still 1. So this becomes negative 5 plus or minus 1 over 4. But that's two possibilities there. That's negative 5 plus 1 divided by 4 and negative 5 minus 1 divided by 4. Negative 5 plus 1 is negative 4, and negative 4 divided by positive 4 is negative 1. So x equals negative 1. That's one answer. Negative 5 minus 4 is a negative 6, and negative 6 divided by 4, that's negative 3 halves. So x equals negative 3 halves is your second solution. Now, when the numbers are fractions and without radicals like this, that tells me the problem probably could have factored to begin with. And it does. So if this little area down here, I'm going to show you that 2x squared plus 5x plus 3 actually would have factored. So it's 2x times x. 3 is going to be a 3 at this end and a 1 at this end. And that's a plus, and that's a plus. So if you do the 4, that's 2x, 3x, and that's 5x. So it does factor. So if you set each factor equal to 0, 2x plus 3 equal to 0, and x plus 1 equal to 0, and you solve these two individual equations, you would get these two answers. And so like I said, either technique would work, but the quadratic formula will always work as long as you know the formula and whether it factors or it does not factor. So this one even works for the ones that factor. So as you can tell, though, just by doing these two problems, factoring did not take me nearly as long, just like 3 steps. So it's like more of a mental process first. And right here, there's just more tedious work. So, but it takes a lot more steps to finally get there. So, and on this next one, the factoring is not going to be an option because it does not factor. So you're kind of stuck with the quadratic formula. So x is equals to opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. But in this particular case, a is 5, b is 6, and c is negative 4. So x is opposite of b, so it's a negative 6, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so it's going to be 6 squared minus 4 times a, which is 5, times c, which is negative 4, all over 2 times 5. So that's negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 6 squared, which is 36. And then negative 4 times 5 times negative 4, I believe, is about 80. So because two negatives make a positive, so it's going to be a plus 80. And then 2 times 5 on the bottom is 10. So it's negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 116. 36 plus 80. All over 10. If you notice, the discriminant was 116 on this one. That's positive. Notice the discriminant on that last one I did a while ago, it was 1. 25 minus 24 was 1. They're positive. So that's why I knew there were going to be two real solutions. There were no i's in these numbers, on these answers. So the square root of 116 is a little bit of a problem because I don't know what that is right off the top of my head. Now, I do know 116 is going to be 4 times, I believe, about 29. 29 times 4, I believe, that's 116. And so if you're taking the square root of 116, it's like taking the square root of 4 times 29. So you're like, what's so special about 4 times 29? Well, because the square root of 4 is 2. So x is equals to a negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 4 was 2. The square root of 29 is just the square root of 29. Now here's where the biggest problem is. Some people just will cancel the 6 and the 10 and be done with it. You got to be careful with that because the 10 is the divisor for the negative 6, but it's also the divisor of the 2 square root of 29. So you got to divide both of them by 10, not just not at the beginnings. So this becomes negative 6 divided by 10, which is negative 3/5, plus or minus 2 square root of 29 over 10 is going to be the square root of 29 over 5. So there are two answers there. There's two answers. There's negative 3/5 plus the square root of 29 over 5 and negative 3/5 minus the square root of 29 over 5. So there are two answers here. It's just the answer for these two are just not as nice as those right here. So these numbers are really like they're either a fraction or an integer. This one has to have radicals in it. So, and that sometimes happens on these things. So and some people, they feel very uncomfortable with those kind of answers because of that. And you got to remember, square root of 29 is just a number. You know, it's like a little over 5. So you're talking about 5.5 or something like that, or maybe 5.4. And then you take 5.4 divided by 5. And so if you work with them a decimal, work with them as a decimal, the numbers make more sense to people. But you got to understand that's not necessary here. We're just going to leave the answers like this. So if you actually want to have, feel good about the tangible answer that you can actually hold and kind of get a feel for, then use your calculator to get to the decimals. But there's those will not be asked of you, I don't believe, in your homework. So this is 1.2 quadratic equations part 2. That's it.